Greetings, greetings, greetings. Thank you all for listening and watching another edition of TEDCO Talks. I'm praying that your 2022 has started out hopefully far better than the 21 that we've left, and that we're going to have a different trajectory here in 22. And the person that we're going to talk to today is probably going to give us some insights as to what some innovations and some things that are going to happen in the medical space around that. But I am so happy. We've had a chance on this platform to be able to talk to some outstanding leaders in Maryland and in the country. But the young lady I'm speaking to today is truly a citizen of the world. She has an academic background, that's some great institutions here as well as overseas, can speak multiple languages. And for me, most of all, she's an engineer. So that's what I love about her. But Kolaleh Eskandanian, the Chief Innovation Officer at Children's Hospital, thank you for joining us here today at TEDCO Talks.
Thank you so much, Troy. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you for taking some time to spend with us. Why don't we start with that? Folks may or may not know, because we got folks, Kolaleh, listen to us from literally all over the planet, all over the country. Take us a little bit about Children's and the work you do as the Chief Innovation Officer there at Children's.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So I'm the Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C., which is a 323-bed hospital in the District of Columbia and among top 10 best children's hospital in the nation, #1 in neonatology. It's a great place to work with, and it's a great opportunity to also be the Chief Innovation Officer in this environment, because we have such a strong research arm at Children's National, and that is the Children's National Research Institute, that really allows the clinicians to also practice research. So clinician researchers come to Children's because there is a great infrastructure to do great work here. So we have 5 centers under Children's National Research Institute. So they focus on neuroscience, cancer and immunology, genetic medicine, translational science. And then the 5th one, which is the youngest one, is the Sheikh Zayed Institute for Pediatric Surgical Innovation. And that is my home. I'm the Executive Director of the Sheikh Zayed Institute for Pediatric Surgical Innovation, and our work is mainly focused on medical device innovation, medtech. So that's why I'm there doing this work. My background, as you mentioned, is in mechanical engineering with a PhD and then an MBA. So in short, we are there. Our mission, my mission as the Chief Innovation Officer of Children's National, is to focus on regulated medical products for children, to bring them from research labs or from our hospital-based specialties, from the clinicians all the way to the market, but most importantly, to our own patients and families, to children. So we define innovation as the process of bringing these novel medical products to market. So whether they were created in our own hospital at Children's National or elsewhere. So when I say elsewhere, is because we also embrace the notion of open innovation. So through the competitions that we have on an annual basis, we source and scout the best technologies, the best ideas for a pediatric need, no matter where that idea comes from.
That's outstanding, and so lot to go into that, lot to go there. We could stay all day just on this, but you talk about innovation, and with innovation comes risk, right? And so, and one of the many connection points, people that might be like, why is he talking to somebody from Children's Hospital in DC? Well, one is we do a lot of medical device work. That's #1, and a lot of our investments are in medical devices. 2 is J Labs. I'll let you talk about J Labs, and we had the young lady who runs J Labs on a few shows ago, is connected, and very much we're part of this ecosystem that you are in DC, but we very much feel a part of the DC you're very much part of our innovation ecosystem, and we're very much part of DC's innovation ecosystem. But my question is more around how because it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is what I would call incubation. You're incubating, you're taking everything from kind of ideation from a lab to ideation to research, and then commercializing it and seeing how it can make it. Is there in that process? Is there the commercialization, not just from a medical point of view, from a commercialization point of view? Is that also part of what you're also trying to do?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. The notion and the idea is really that, we don't do research solely for more publications on the shelves, right? So we want to translate. That's our obligation to the public. That's our obligation to children and families. And we define our mission at Innovation Ventures at Children's National. That's the group, the commercialization arm of Children's National, and falls under my team. So I'm the managing director of Innovation Ventures at Children's National. We define our mission as to add the R in research to the D in development, right? So the D in development is where J Labs and the industry come from. So we do research very well. So that's our mission. That's our forte. That's what we know how to do it best. We're very well funded in terms of NIH funding, federal funding in general. And so we do that very well. But it cannot be a commercializable product without that partnership with the industry, because they are the ones who understand the development parts, the regulatory pathway and the business models that we need to understand and partner with in order to bring our novelties, our discoveries to the market. So while commercialization is very important in terms of us being responsible to the public, to our patients, but we also measure success in terms of impact in our own clinics. Yep. So if we can demonstrate first that, our research work discoveries can have a direct impact in our own clinics first, that brings an element of de-risking. And you mentioned incubation, so it's incubation and de-risking, then makes that piece of intellectual property more attractive to a potential licensee, a company that is interested in our work.
So like you've got a great balance between doing research to advance knowledge, but also though with also an eye and a pivot towards taking that knowledge into an application and an impact for your patients and beyond. Is that a fair summary?
Perfect. Absolutely. Yes.
Great. Well, look, we've already introduced that you're an engineer, and I've kind of said you've been MIT, you've been American, been some international. But I guess what I want to spend a minute on is you. I want to spend a little time on you. You've got this great profession, but let's spend a minute on Kolaleh. And you are obviously a very accomplished scientist. With a bunch of acronyms behind your last name rolling there. But you're a woman scientist, and it's like being a Black engineer. There's not a lot of us, and sometimes we're the only one in the room or the only one in the building in some cases. And I guess my question to you all is, your journey has been one that I'm sure has had forks in the road, places where you've made decisions that, it looked more intuitive to go left, but you ended up going right, and you went right, and that paid out for you. I guess I'd like for you to talk to someone about how you face those decision points in your life, particularly for a young woman who wants to be a scientist, and maybe even a foreign national woman who wants to be a scientist and is walking down a similar path that you've already walked down.
Thank you for that question. It's even crazier than that for me. High school education was French education, and unlike most of my classmates that ended up with a university in France or a French-speaking country, I actually started the first semester of the engineering school in Lausanne, in Switzerland. So I was, in École Polytechnique de Lausanne, but I was always looking to go to Moscow, the university that I knew science was so great for my field of interest, physics and engineering. And so secretly, I was working on, finding that connection and getting invited for an interview to that university, unbeknownst to my parents. So I decided that, I wanted to study in Russia. And so after the first, I was still in my first semester of engineering school in Lausanne, Switzerland, that I got the invitation, and I flew to get my student visa and then go to Moscow, Russia. So that's where I got my education, my undergrad education. I was one of the 5 women in a class of 100. Wow. In the engineering school. So, all eyes were on the 5 women. There were some advantages, because guys would carry my bags for me and those type of things.
You took advantage of it. Look at you. Boy, it's gonna be some. We're gonna get some quotes. We're gonna get some chatter on this one. I bet you.
So those were the cool things, but also, from my perspective, I had to perform well, because everybody, you're on the watch, and the first year was only to study Russian, to become proficient, to then enter the university, but it wasn't easy. So it was not easy to be in an engineering school in a language that is not so easy to learn. So, but I became so proficient that, after a couple of months, the Russian students would ask for my notes. So that made me feel good.
I want to make sure everyone understands what you just said. So you had a desire to go study in Moscow, even though you did not know Russian.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
I just want you to. I don't want you to repeat that so people can hear this.
Yes. I had some interest because that's the university that my grandfather went to, and he was a known figure in Iran, which is my country of origin. And I always was curious and wanted to follow his footsteps. So that's how I ended up in Moscow, same university that my grandfather went to.
That is amazing.
That's
perseverance. That's perseverance.
Yeah. So it was the road less traveled, if you will. And
that's not even a road that's paved. Okay, so that's not even a road, that's a trail.
Yes. And the first post engineering school, the job I had was with Intelsat, so in Washington DC, which at the time had the monopoly over satellite services, so geosatellite services at the time. Which is not hot anymore. So we have all the lower orbit satellites that we use. So then I went to get my graduate degrees, and my first job after the MBA program was with Accenture, which at that time was Anderson Consulting. So, yeah.
You've had a great, so along that pathway, I got to imagine, particularly being the only woman and having the guys carry your bags, they probably wasn't just carrying your bags. So I'm assuming that there were mentors and coaches and folks that you relied on, and had maybe even to this day continue to rely on to guide you, as you were the only, one of 5 women in the class.
Yes, that helped a lot. I always relied on good mentors, and I should say that I've been very lucky to have had great mentors along the way. So in Moscow, one of my mentors, actually a very accomplished woman who was not an engineer, but it was someone that I helped translate a play by Jean Genet from French to Russian. So that was unusual, so that was like, my after kind of weekend work to make a little bit money. But the woman that I delivered that job for was one of my mentors, a strong woman, very well known in her field, literature field, right? So I think that, that was very important because I didn't grow up as a kind of traditional 100% engineer. So I was lucky to add, some different field, literature, different type of culture to my
your renaissance.
education. Yeah.
Your renaissance. So how many languages do you speak?
Persian is my native language. I finished the French education, so French is second native, and Russian and English.
Okay, so that's 4 outside of English. So I'm going to ask you a couple one-word questions. I want you to answer the question in one of those languages. Okay? I got you. All right, here we go. Favorite color?
Black. Oh, no, that was English. Sorry.
That was English.
Черный цвет.
Okay. Favorite food?
I was going to say beef stroganoff because it was Russian, but then that's Russian too. Okay, I will. Warme sabzi.
All right.
That was Persian.
Favorite vacation spot?
Saint-Jean, Cap Ferrat.
Look at you. That I know. That one I know. Favorite TV show?
Oh, I don't watch TV.
Okay, favorite movie. Favorite movie.
Oh, Camille Claudel.
Ah, now what's that? That one I didn't hear.
French.
That was French for what movie?
Camille Claudel, a student of Rodin. She was a student of Rodin, a woman sculptor, sculptor that, a very interesting movie. You should watch it.
I will.
I think with subtitle in English, Camille Claudel. Camille Claudel was the student of Rodin, and many of famous Rodin sculptures were taken from. Kind of back then, IP didn't exist, but Rodin had kind of copied them. So
the last one, book you've recently read or favorite book?
The recent book that I read actually was by Pushkin, Tonki and Tolstoy in Russian.
And that means what?
Slim and fat, Tonki and Tolstoy. but it's a satire. So.
Got you. So let me ask you. So we can go back to English now. And to continue to have a little bit more fun and learn about you. What would be? I'm gonna ask you. You can answer one of them. I'm gonna ask you 2 questions. You can answer one or both. What would be, because they're related? What would you be doing if you weren't doing this job as Chief Innovation Officer? Or the kind of the correlate to that is a secret talent that you have that not a lot of people know that you have.
If I were not doing this, well, my secret talent you already maybe elaborated on is I speak multiple languages and I try to stay current. So I hate to lose any of them. So maybe I would be a translator. I don't know.
There you go. Hey, you know what? We don't do politics on this thing, but the world could use somebody to help navigate some of the stuff with the skills that you have. So right now, the world could use that skill. So going a little bit back to your innovation in children's, clearly we are, as I started this episode, we talked about 22, and we're trying to hopefully not repeat 21, and a lot of that was because of COVID. We're as people see this, and this is tape about to see this, I think the numbers show that this current surge is starting to have, should be on the downside of this surge. I'm no scientist, but I sit in this and I look at this. There will be another variant probably of this thing at some point. There'll be another COVID-like thing that's going to hit us. And so where I'm going with my question is, as you think about your innovation and what in particular also work around children, how are you guys thinking about how we come out of COVID, but more importantly, how do we prepare for the next variant and or the next pandemic that's going to happen?
Yeah, and I speak only, my own opinion. So this is not the opinion of Children's National Hospital.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that disclaimer.
I really think that, one lesson learned should be that we should have put more emphasis on global health. So we are not an isolated country, so we shouldn't think in isolation. I think that the United States, and I give credit to Dr. Peter Hotez, someone that I know worked on a grant together when he was in Washington, D.C. Now, Dr. Hotez is with Texas Children's in Houston. But his team all along have been working on a vaccine that was not necessarily an innovation, right? So they took an old technology that was proven to work and for hepatitis B vaccine. And they used that platform technology and they came up with a vaccine, a COVID vaccine that got emergency use authorization in India. So I think that, we focused too much on innovation to bring to market vaccines that were novel and of course very effective, but perhaps we could have thought more globally, right? So the mRNA vaccines are expensive to manufacture and also require certain refrigeration and all that may not work in the Southern Hemisphere, in the global South. So perhaps, innovation should have been combined with what we already know well and has worked, right? Like what Peter Hotez was working on for 2 years of the pandemic. In summary, unless the Southern Hemisphere, unless the global South is fully vaccinated, we will see these variants coming to Northern Hemisphere. Delta came from India, Omicron came from South Africa, so perhaps a strategy should be to vaccinate the Southern Hemisphere.
All I can say is amen, and yes, and we, I'm hoping out of this, well, two things I've hoped out is getting to non-scientists, is what you just said is that we, no matter what our nationalities are, our creeds are, that we all, at the end of the day, all human beings, we all populate this one little rock that's sitting here. And you would hope that this event, and if you think about history, and I think I'm a pretty good student of history, this is the first time that we've had a true global event that really all of us, you can talk about World War I and II, but that really didn't involve the whole world, right? This truly is a global event. And I don't think we treat it as a global event, I guess is the point. But at a much more simple level, we're on this platform here with Zoom. And, I used to tell people at the beginning of this, Kolaleh, that, people would have their kids running in or the dog would come in and everybody say, excuse me, but I used to, and I still tell people, don't say, excuse me, we're in your home. We're not in your office, we're in your home. And what we've gotten to see is that Troy is something beyond, my profession. I have a family, I have kids, I got a dog. And so we should recognize, as we come out of this, I'm hoping that we recognize our humanity and we recognize that we are people beyond our professional titles.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, and also, this pandemic demonstrated that we could do things differently, right? So it's okay. It's okay to be interrupted sometime, if you're in your home, but it's keeping focus is more important, right? So despite the interruptions, and kudos to all the moms who had to homeschool as well as work at the same time. So that's not an easy task. But kudos also to the employers who made that possible. So at least at the onset of the pandemic, that was so hard on so many people. Wow. There was an opportunity to do remote work. So kudos again to the IT departments in the organizations that made it available. I know that at Children's National, just before the pandemic, we had signed the contract for one of the platforms, Zoom. So it was good timing. It was just good timing that every employee had access to Zoom and could initiate a call.
So as we get to move to the close, I got to imagine that as and you've already kind of intimated that as Chief Innovation Officer and your team, part of your job is to kind of, what I like to say is look towards the horizon, even see beyond the horizon. So as you look towards that horizon, what is it you see? What are some of the things that you're seeing as you look towards the horizon in your role as the Chief Innovation Officer?
Yeah, thank you for that, Troy. And I should put this in the context of, being a Chief Innovation Officer in the pediatric domain.
Pediatrics, yep.
So we are in a domain that is underserved, because pediatric children are 20% of the population. But the notion out there is that kids are generally healthy. And so the industry does not invest a lot in pediatric products, right? Mm-hmm. So our problem is that often we have to jerry-rig, for example, a medical device that was built for adults and make that work for kids, because the pediatric version of it does not exist. And so that in itself is already a challenge, to constantly look and see with whom we can partner that has a vision for pediatric innovation, right? So we pick our partners very carefully and very selectively. So when I look, you said that when I look at the horizon, I really would like to see more regulated medical products in the market that have a pediatric labeling. So we are no longer in a situation that we use a product off market to basically test it on kids, innovate on kids. So that is not acceptable, and that's something that we constantly work, through advocacy, through introducing more novel products specifically labeled for children, and would love to see the world that places the same amount of attention for children that we're doing for adults.
Well, I think that's an outstanding place to stop, and I will echo that. And as those who are watching this, and repeat what she just said these last minute and a half, what she just said, as you think about entrepreneurial and innovations, and clearly we stand ready at TEDCO to be an investor in that, but there's others as well. Being able to, part of innovation is going into places that people are not, and that's part of what you're saying. And so being able to go to where others are not, which is in these children's devices, has opportunity. So I'm also presenting this not just as a medical one and for children as you did, but I'm also talking to people who want to be innovation and want to lead that innovation, and speaking to those individuals to listen to your last few words. So Kolaleh, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Thank you for all you do for children and for the medical industry and your leadership there at Children, your leadership across DC. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Troy, and thank you for the fantastic team at TEDCO. We really admire your organization, and we're happy that we are partners and collaborators. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as I close, some folks who've been watching this probably kept looking at me. Yes, I have grown. I'm trying to grow back my hair. And so I went bald over 20 years ago for a variety of reasons, which are not worth saying live. And my children said they wanted to see daddy with hair. So I grew it back. But I can tell y'all, don't get used to seeing this, because it is probably next time you see me, this might be back bald again. So I'm just letting y'all know. So anyway, thank you all again for listening to TEDCO Talks. We truly appreciate all the commentary and all the viewership and all the sharing of these. You truly have been a blessing to us. So I just want to say, continue to be safe, be sane, be healthy, be blessed. See you next time. Thank you. Thank you, Kolaleh.
Thank you.